Video recording. Yay! Okay, so some of the questions that you want us to answer. The first question is, how has what you've learned with picture books and diversity changed your approach to teaching them? My response would be that in class you're always talking about how you're a white American middle-class woman and it's hard for you to relate to other people, whether that's through a story about an African American or someone who's gay. Like, it's hard for you to relate to them because you've never experienced what they have. Sorry, I'm sick. Now, that's not to say that you can't sympathize for them or you can't try to understand. It's just saying that, like, your level of understanding is very, very limited because you haven't experienced it yourself. And I like that. As a result, when you teach these books, you emphasize to us that it's hard for you to relate. However, when someone can relate, you allow them to share in class. And my students might be a little too young for me to explain to them that I am a white, middle class, blah, 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 woman. But I would hope that I could explain to them that I haven't necessarily experienced that, but then if they have experienced it or if they can relate, I hope that I can allow them to share the way that you allowed us to share. So I guess you could say, like, in class I've learned to be more sensitive to how my students are going to react because of how sensitive you are to the way that we react in class. Moving on to the next question. It says, include how you would expand students' knowledge of the category. Category being picture books and diversity. So if I were to go back home to where I wanted to teach is actually all the way back home. But there's very little diversity within my community. So there's going to be very little diversity within the school that I teach, whether that be the school that I went to or the local schools around me even. There's limited diversity. I can say for myself that I wasn't exposed to much diversity until I actually came here. So as a responsibility of a teacher, it'll be my job to educate the students about the diversity that exists within the world. And I want to emphasize to them that people who are different don't live off in some faraway land across the ocean, but instead, like, get them to understand that people right here in America, here in Indiana, if we wanted to get smaller, are different. And maybe someday, or I could tell them, maybe someday, like, a new student will come in who's different, and we need to be able to accept him. So I'd want to educate them by reading books about not just about diversity within, like, the skin or a person's, like, religious beliefs, or, well, we can't really touch on religious beliefs in school, but culture and things like that. But I want to emphasize to them that diversity is also, like, a personal thing. For example, that book, My Princess Boy, or My Little Princess Boy, you read it in class. I think that's such a great book because it shows kids that it's okay to be different. And my only hope is to find other books that I can add to my library that the kids will be able to relate in the same way, like, oh, well, like, I like to wear a pink dress, but everybody else thinks that it's bad, but if in this book it says that it's okay, then it's okay, and I'd like to be able to do that for my students, to educate them about the world around them, because for me, like, growing up, like I said, I wasn't exposed to much diversity, but my mom, she would find books for me, since I was such a reader, that would have to do with other cultures and talk about the way that other people live. And I feel like that's what has allowed me to be more open about coming here to Ball State and like the diversity that I was exposed to. Like, even though I wasn't exposed to it at home, I kind of had an idea of like, okay, like some things are sensitive, so I need to be more sensitive when I approach somebody, and I need to think about how it would affect them, you know, me coming in like trying to pretend like I know their life experience when I really don't, but instead to let them talk, let them inform me, let me learn about it. And I hope that I can get my kids to think that same way. If we look at the last question, it says, sorry, one second. How has what you've learned affected the way in which you can incorporate them into different subjects? So from class, I've learned that it's not as difficult as I thought it would be to include like picture books with diversity into other subjects. I think an example would be something as simple as reading a book before one of my math lessons. Can't really say that I've found that book, but the book might be something about like measurements and about how someone in America measures something, and then like flip the page and it goes to how someone in Australia measures something, or how someone in China measures something. And it would like talk about measuring relating to math, but it would also have these different pictures of these people who don't necessarily look like my students. But at the end, you know, like the story could be like, well, like these people are all different, but we all measure in about the same way, giving them, you know, like people are different, but there's similarities, and that, you know, incorporating that into a math lesson, like wouldn't necessarily be able to go over like, oh, well, the diversity, you know, like in China and Australia, but instead focus more on the measurement. But it's still exposing my kids to that diversity would be a lot easier than what I thought it would be. I mean, from our guest speaker, we did learn that there's a very limited number of diversity books. I think it's something like 10% of books are about like diversity, or I don't really know how to say it, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. But I think if I found a list, that I would be able to relate it to things in certain subjects that would be so much easier than what I thought it would be. So I want to thank you for that. And I think that's the last question. So thank you for listening to my lovely self-recorded video. I'll see you in class. Bye.